The day had started like any other for the narrator. It was a bright morning with a gentle breeze moving through the trees. The sun was shining softly, and the birds were singing happily. The narrator had planned to spend the day working on the farm, fixing some fences and checking the barn. Life on the farm was peaceful most of the time. The narrator enjoyed the quiet moments, the sound of the wind in the fields, and the smell of fresh earth. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, and worries felt far away. As the narrator walked toward the barn, they noticed the air smelled like fresh wood and hay. The barn had been in the family for many years. It was old but strong, made of thick wooden boards that had seen many seasons. Inside the barn, there were tools, farming equipment, and a few animals resting in the stalls. The narrator loved this place. It was a small world where hard work and nature came together. Suddenly, a loud and sharp noise broke the calm. It sounded like metal hitting wood, followed by a strange crashing sound. The narrator's heart jumped. It was so loud it felt like an earthquake had hit the farm. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The birds went silent, and even the wind paused, as if holding its breath. The narrator turned quickly, eyes wide with surprise and concern. From a distance, the narrator saw a car that had not been there. Before, it was unusual because the road near the barn was quiet and not often used by many people. The car looked damaged, its front end pressed hard against the side of the barn. Dust and small pieces of wood floated in the air. The barn's wall was broken where the car had hit it.
Ow.
The wooden boards splintered, and the door hung open awkwardly. The barn that had been so steady and strong now showed signs of injury. The narrator hurried toward the car, moving as fast as they could without slipping on the dirt. They wanted to see if the driver was okay. When the narrator got closer, they saw Karen inside the car. Karen was someone from the nearby town. She was known to many people because she often spoke loudly about what she thought was right or wrong. Some found her strong and confident. Others thought she was difficult to deal with. Karen looked shaken. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. She blinked as if trying to understand what had just happened. The narrator called out to her, "Are you all right? Did you hurt yourself?" Karen nodded slowly but did not say much at first. She seemed confused and a little embarrassed. It was clear she did not expect this accident to happen. The narrator noticed that her clothes were neat, and she smelled like she had just come from somewhere important. It made the narrator wonder what had brought her to this quiet farm road. Carefully, the narrator opened the car door to help Karen get out. She stepped out slowly, holding onto the car for support. Her legs looked a bit unsteady, but she did not complain of pain. The narrator saw a small scratch on her arm, but nothing serious. "You're lucky this wasn't worse," the narrator said gently. Karen looked away for a moment, and then back at the barn. "I didn't mean to do this," she said quietly, her voice soft, but with a hint of frustration. I lost control for a moment." The narrator could see that Karen was upset, but there was something more. Her eyes showed a mix of worry and fear. The narrator felt a strange feeling, a mix of concern and curiosity. What had caused her to lose control like that? Was it just a simple mistake, or something more? The barn stood behind Karen, looking damaged but still holding strong. The sun cast long shadows across the broken wood, and small birds fluttered nearby, disturbed by the noise. The narrator took a deep breath, trying to calm down and think clearly. "I'll help you," the narrator said. "But first, let's make sure you're really okay. Do you want me to call someone? A family member or a friend?" Karen shook her head. No. I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I can handle it." The narrator nodded, but still felt unsure. Karen's pride was clear, but the accident had caused real damage. The barn was important, and fixing it would take time and money. The narrator wondered how Karen planned to make things right as they stood there. Some neighbors started to notice what had happened. A few people came over curious about the noise. They looked at the car and then at Karen. Whispers began to spread. Some were kind, others less so. The narrator noticed Karen's face flush with embarrassment. She was not used to being in a situation where she was the one needing help. The narrator gently asked Karen, "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Maybe I can understand better. Karen hesitated, but then sighed deeply. I was driving home from town. I was distracted, and I didn't see the turn coming up fast enough. I tried to brake, but the road was slippery. I lost control and, well, this is what happened. The narrator listened carefully. Explanation made sense, but something still didn't feel quite right. Karen's eyes kept darting away, and she seemed nervous. The narrator looked at the car again. It was clear that the crash had done more than just scratch the barn. The front of the car was dented badly, and smoke was coming out of the engine. The narrator knew the repairs would be expensive for both the car and the barn, trying to keep things calm. The narrator said, "Don't worry. We'll figure this out. The important thing is you're safe. You can take care of the barn later." Karen gave a small, thankful smile but didn't say much. The tension in her body was still there. The narrator went back to the barn and touched. The broken wood felt rough under their hand, like it was tired but still strong. They thought about how much work it would take to fix this. The farm was not just a place, it was a home, a memory of years gone by. It hurt to see the barn damaged, but the narrator knew it could be fixed. While they were thinking, Karen stood quietly nearby, looking at the ground. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble." The narrator smiled gently. "Accidents happen. Let's just make sure we handle it together." At that moment, the narrator realized something important. This crash was not just a simple accident. It was the start of something bigger. Karen's nervous behavior, the way she looked away, and the quiet apology all hinted at secrets waiting to be uncovered. The narrator's calm farm was about to become the center of a story that no one expected. The sun moved higher in the sky. The peaceful farm was slowly waking up again. Birds started to sing, and the breeze returned. But now, the day held a new energy, one filled with questions and the promise of truth. The narrator looked at Karen and decided to be patient. Whatever had happened, they would find out in time. For now, they would focus on making sure everyone was safe and the barn was protected. As Karen carefully stepped away from the car and the broken barn, the narrator thought about the day ahead. There would be repairs, conversations, and maybe some surprises. The quiet farm was no longer just a place of peace. It was a place where a story was beginning to unfold, one crash at a time. After the crash, the farm was no longer quiet. The noise of the accident had brought neighbors and curious people to the scene. The narrator felt a mixture of emotions. There was still some worry about the damage to the barn and the car, but also a growing feeling that something was not quite right about Karen's story. The accident seemed simple, but the way Karen acted made the narrator wonder if there was more behind what had happened. The narrator decided to check the security cameras around the farm. These cameras had been set up to watch over the property. For safety and to keep an eye on the animals, they were placed in spots that showed the entrance to the farm, the barn, and the surrounding fields. The narrator hoped that watching the footage would help explain what really happened. Sitting in front of the small monitor in the house, the narrator pressed play and watched carefully. The screen showed the quiet road outside the farm, just as it had been earlier that morning. At first, everything looked normal. A few birds flew by, and the wind moved the leaves on the trees. Then, about 10 minutes before the crash, the camera caught a car driving slowly down the road. It was Karen's car. The narrator's eyes stayed glued to the screen as the car moved closer to the barn, but something felt strange. Karen's driving did not look calm or careful. She was looking around nervously, glancing quickly over her shoulders several times. It was as if she was worried about being seen or followed. The narrator felt a chill run down their spine. Why would Karen be so anxious on a quiet country road? The car stopped just for a moment near a small path that led away from the main road. Karen got out briefly and looked around carefully before getting back in. The narrator noticed that Karen seemed to be carrying something small in her hand. It was hard to tell exactly what it was, but it looked like a small package wrapped in brown paper. The narrator's mind raced with questions. What was Karen doing on the farm? Why did she stop near that path? And why did she seem so scared? The accident suddenly seemed less like a simple mistake and more like a moment in a bigger story. As the camera showed the moments leading up to the crash, the narrator saw Karen's car start moving again, but this time her driving was faster and less steady. The car swerved slightly as she approached the barn. It looked like she was trying to avoid something on the road, or maybe she was just too nervous to focus. Then came the crash, the sound of metal hitting wood, dust rising, and Karen's car pressing hard against the barn's side. The narrator paused the video and leaned back in the chair, feeling a mix of surprise and concern. The security footage had shown things that Karen had not mentioned. It was clear she had been on the farm earlier than she said. Her nervous behavior suggested she was hiding something, deciding it was best to keep the footage for now. The narrator made a mental note to watch it again later. The story was becoming more complicated. The narrator needed time to think. After finishing with the cameras, the narrator stepped outside to look at the barn again. The damage was worse than it first seemed. The wooden wall was cracked, some of the beams were broken, and parts of the roof had shifted. It would take a lot of work to fix it properly. The narrator felt a deep sadness to see this place, which had always been safe and strong, now injured. Karen stood nearby, watching quietly. Her face was pale, and she seemed tired. The narrator decided to speak with her again, hoping to learn more and maybe help her. Karen, the narrator began carefully, I saw some things on the cameras. You were here earlier, weren't you? Before the crash? Karen looked away for a moment, then nodded slowly. She said softly, I came earlier today. The narrator waited quietly, giving Karen space to explain. Karen took a deep breath and said, I didn't want to tell anyone because I was afraid. I have some problems, and I thought I could fix them on my own. The narrator listened, feeling sympathy but also wanting to understand more. What kind of problems? They asked gently. Karen hesitated, then said, It's personal. Something I don't want others to know about, but I brought something here earlier, something I was supposed to hide. The narrator's curiosity grew. What did you hide? Karen looked down, ashamed. I don't want to say right now. Maybe later. The narrator nodded. Okay, but if you need help, you can tell me. Karen gave a small, thankful smile, but stayed quiet after that. The narrator could see that Karen was carrying a heavy burden. The accident, the hidden package, and her nervous behavior all showed that she was in trouble. The narrator wondered if there was a way to help her without making things worse. Meanwhile, the neighbors who had come to look at the crash began to talk among themselves. Some blamed Karen for being careless, while others whispered about what she might be hiding. Rumors started to spread like wildfire. The narrator wished people would be kinder and wait to know the full story. That afternoon, the narrator went to check the barn more carefully. They walked around the outside, noting all the broken wood and cracked beams. Inside the barn, some tools had fallen, and dust covered the floor. The animals seemed restless, sensing something was wrong. The narrator knew repairs would not be easy. They would need to buy new wood, hire someone to help, and take time away from other important work. But the barn was too important to leave broken. It was part of the farm's history and the narrator's life. While thinking about this, the narrator's phone rang. It was a call from Karen. She sounded nervous, but more honest than before. I've been thinking, Karen said quietly. Want to make things right? I'll help pay for the repairs. I want to cause more trouble. The narrator was surprised but glad. Thank you, Karen. That means a lot. Karen sighed. I don't want to lose respect here. I want to fix this. The narrator promised to work together. Even though the accident had caused problems, it was a chance to build trust. That evening, the narrator sat by the window, watching the sun set behind the fields. The day had been full of surprises. The crash, the secret package, Karen's strange behavior. The quiet farm had become a place of mystery and questions, the narrator thought. About Karen, she seemed like a person who carried a lot of pain and fear. Maybe the accident was a signal that she needed help more than anyone knew. As the stars began to shine in the sky, the narrator made a decision. They would be patient and kind. They would listen and watch carefully. The story was far from over, and the truth was waiting to come out. Tomorrow, they would check the cameras again and talk with Karen more. There was a secret in this crash, and the narrator wanted to understand it fully. For now, the night brought calm to the farm. The barn stood quietly, waiting for repairs, and the wind whispered softly through the trees. But the day's events had changed everything. The peaceful life on the farm was no longer the same. A new story had begun, and the narrator was ready to face whatever came next. After the crash and the uneasy conversation with Karen, the narrator's mind was full of questions. The day seemed peaceful outside, but inside there was a storm of thoughts. What was Karen hiding? Why had she been so nervous? Why did she bring that small package to the farm? These questions stayed in the narrator's mind as the afternoon sun warmed the earth. The narrator decided to look at the security camera footage again, hoping to find new clues. Sitting down at the small desk, the narrator carefully rewound the video and watched the scenes again. This time, the focus was on the moments before Karen's first arrival earlier in the day, not just the crash itself. On the screen, the camera showed a small dirt path near the barn, covered by trees and bushes. It was a quiet and hidden spot that not many people used. Suddenly, Karen appeared on the screen, walking quickly and carrying the small package. She looked around nervously, making sure no one was watching. The narrator's heart beat faster. This was something Karen hadn't mentioned before. Karen moved toward a small, old shed behind the barn. The shed was worn and dusty, with paint peeling off the wooden walls. It looked like no one had used it for a long time. Karen carefully opened the door and went inside, carrying the package with her. The camera could not see much inside the shed, but the narrator could guess that Karen was hiding the package there. The narrator paused the video and stared at the screen. What could be inside that package? Why was Karen so afraid to be seen? The farm was usually a safe place, but now it felt like a secret world filled with hidden stories. After watching the footage, the narrator decided to visit the shed. Walking through the tall grass and weeds, they reached the old building. The door creaked as the narrator pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled musty and old. Dust floated in the sunlight coming through the cracks in the wood. There was an old wooden table, some broken tools, and a few empty boxes. The narrator looked around carefully. The shed was quiet and still, but it held a strange feeling, as if it was keeping secrets from the past. The narrator thought about Karen, how she had been so careful not to be seen here. This was the place where her secret had been hidden, but what was it? Suddenly, a soft noise came from outside. The narrator turned and saw Karen standing near the shed, watching quietly. She did not say anything, but her eyes showed a mix of fear and sadness. The narrator spoke gently. "Karen, I saw you come here today. You don't have to be afraid. I want to help, not judge." Karen looked away for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I'm scared," she said softly. "This secret has been with me for a long time. It's not easy to share." The narrator nodded, understanding that some things are hard to say out loud. "You can tell me when you're ready," the narrator said kindly. "I'm here to listen." Karen stayed silent for a moment, then finally said, "There are things in life that people try to hide because they think it will protect them. But sometimes hiding only makes things worse." The narrator waited patiently, wanting to hear more but not wanting to push. After a while, Karen said quietly, "The package I brought here is important to me. It's connected to my family and some mistakes from the past. I didn't want anyone to find it because I was afraid of what would happen." The narrator felt a new level of respect for Karen. Everyone has struggles, and sometimes those struggles are hard to talk about. "Thank you for telling me," the narrator said gently. "It's brave to face your fears." Karen gave a small, sad smile. "I hope that one day I can fix the mistakes and stop hiding." The narrator looked at the old shed and thought about how places can hold memories, good and bad. This shed, quiet and forgotten, was now part of Karen's story and the narrator's. Story 2. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the narrator and Karen stood together quietly. The farm felt different now, not just a place of work and peace, but a place where people's lives and secrets met. Later that evening, The narrator went back inside and watched the camera footage one more time. There was a moment when Karan's car had passed by the farm road several times, always looking worried. Sometimes she stopped, sometimes she drove slowly. It was clear she was trying to figure out what to do. The narrator thought about how people carry their past with them, like invisible burdens that weigh heavily on the heart. Karen's secret was like that burden. It's the accident, the hidden package. It's the nervous behavior. It was all connected. The narrator realized that this was not just about fixing a barn or a broken car. It was about understanding a person's story, their fears and their hopes. The narrator wanted to be patient and kind, to offer help without judgment. As night fell, the narrator looked out the window at the stars shining brightly in the clear sky. Tomorrow would be a new day, full of chances to learn more and maybe help Karen face her secret. The story was becoming deeper and more real with every moment. The barn stood quietly in the moonlight, waiting for its turn to be fixed. But more importantly, the farm was ready to be a place where healing could begin. The narrator felt ready to listen and to stand beside Karen as the truth slowly came to light. The night was calm, but inside, the narrator knew that the farm's quiet life was changing. The secret Karen had hidden was no longer alone. It had found a witness. The next morning, the air was cool and fresh, with soft light filtering through the trees. The narrator woke up with a mix of feelings: curious, a little nervous, but mostly ready to face whatever the day would bring.
The quiet farm with its
fields and old barn seemed peaceful again, but the narrator knew things had changed. Karen's secret was still there, waiting to be understood. After breakfast, the narrator went outside and saw Karen sitting on a broken wooden crate near the barn. She looked tired but more calm than before. Her eyes met the narrator's, and there was a silent understanding between them. It was time to talk honestly. The narrator walked over and said gently, "Karen, I think it's better if we talk openly. You don't have to be afraid. Whatever you want to share, I'm here to listen." Karen took a deep breath and nodded. She seemed to gather her courage. "You're right," she said softly. "I can't keep hiding this anymore." The narrator sat down nearby, giving Karen space, but showing support. Karen's voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger as she spoke. "The package I hid in the shed. It's connected to my family. There are things from the past that I didn't want anyone to know. Things that could change how people see me." The narrator listened carefully. "What kind of things?" they asked softly. Karen hesitated, then continued. "A few years ago, my family went through a hard time. There were mistakes made, and some people were hurt. I tried to fix things quietly, but it didn't work. I started hiding things, letters, documents, things that could cause trouble if they were found." The narrator nodded, understanding that sometimes people try to protect themselves by keeping secrets. It must be hard carrying all that alone. The narrator said. Karen looked down. "Yes, it feels like a heavy weight. I thought if no one knew, maybe the past would stay buried. But it never really goes away." The narrator reached out and gently placed a hand on Karen's shoulder. "Sometimes sharing the truth can be the first step to healing. I have to do it alone." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm scared, but I want to try." Together, they decided to open the package. Karen carefully took it from her bag and placed it on the old table in the shed. The narrator watched quietly as she untied the string and unfolded the brown paper. Inside were several old letters, some photographs, and a small notebook. The letters were yellowed with age, the handwriting shaky but clear. The photographs showed people from long ago. Some looked serious, others smiling gently. The notebook had pages filled with writing. "Stories of a family struggling through hard times," Karen explained. "These letters were from my grandfather. He made some choices that caused pain. The notebook has my grandmother's words she wrote. Everything she felt and saw." The narrator felt a mix of sadness and respect. These were real memories, real lives behind the papers. "What do you want to do with these?" the narrator asked. Karen looked hopeful. "I want to understand my family better. Maybe by facing the past, I can find a way to make peace with it." The narrator smiled. That sounds brave and wise. As the day went on, Karen and the narrator talked more. Karen shared stories about her childhood, about the happy times and the hard moments. The narrator told her about the farm, about the barn, and what it meant to have a place to call home. Slowly, the walls between them began to come down. Karen's nervousness faded, replaced by a quiet strength. The accident that had once seemed like a disaster was now a turning point, a moment that brought truth into the light. Later, they walked outside to look at the barn again. The damage was still there, but the narrator was no longer angry or sad. It was a reminder of a new beginning, a chance to rebuild not just the barn, but trust and friendship. Karen looked at the broken wood and said softly, "I want to help fix this. I want to be part of making things right." Right. The narrator nodded. "We'll fix it together, step by step." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the fields, the two stood side by side. The farm was quiet, but it was filled with hope. That night, the narrator thought about the day's events. Secret was no longer hidden in the shadows. It was out in the open, where it could be faced and healed. The farm had changed, and so had Karen. What started as an accident had turned into something much more, a story of courage, honesty, and new beginnings. And the barn, it would stand again, stronger than before, just like the people who cared for it. The morning sun rose slowly over the farm, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the gentle sounds of birds singing and leaves rustling. The barn, still marked by the damage from the crash, stood quietly in the light. But today felt different. There was a sense of hope and new beginnings in the air. The narrator woke up feeling calm but ready for the day ahead. After the honest conversation with Karen the day before, things had shifted between them. What had started as a moment of tension and fear had slowly grown into something more. Understanding and trust. Karen arrived early, carrying a toolbox and a determined smile. She looked more relaxed than before, her eyes bright with a new kind of hope. The narrator welcomed her with a warm smile, and together they walked toward the barn. "We have a lot of work to do," the narrator said, "but I'm glad you're here to help." Karen nodded. "I want to fix the barn, and maybe even some parts of my life." They began by clearing the broken pieces of wood and old nails from around the barn. The sun grew higher, warming the farm, and the sounds of their work filled the quiet air. As they worked side by side, they talked about many things: the past, the future, and the stories that had brought them together. Karen shared more about her family's history, the mistakes they had made, and her hopes to make amends. The narrator listened closely, offering encouragement and kindness. It was clear that this day was not just about repairing a building, but about healing old wounds. Neighbors who had heard about the crash stopped by to watch the repairs. Some offered tools, others brought food or just kind words. The farm community, which had once been quiet and distant, came together in support. Karen's actions showed she was willing to make things right. And slowly, the whispers of judgment turned into words of encouragement. As the sun moved across the sky, the barn's broken wall began to take shape again. New wooden boards replaced. The damaged ones, nails were hammered carefully, and the door was fixed so it would close properly. The old building, once scarred by the accident, started to look strong and whole again. During breaks, the narrator and Karen sat on the porch of the barn, watching the clouds drift by. Karen looked thoughtful. "I never thought I would feel this kind of peace," she said quietly. "I was so scared before, but now I feel like I'm not alone." The narrator smiled. "You're never alone. You'll have challenges, but facing them together makes a difference." As the day turned into evening, the farm was alive with a new energy. The barn stood tall, ready to protect the animals and store the tools once again. More than that, it was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even when things break, they can be made whole again. That night, the narrator and Karen sat by the fire outside the house. The stars shone brightly overhead, and the warm glow of the flames made the night feel cozy and safe. They talked about the future, about fixing the barn completely, about making the farm a better place, and about the new friendship that had grown from a moment of accident and truth. Karen looked at the narrator and said, "Thank you for believing in me, even when I was hiding so much. I want to be better for myself and for this place." The narrator nodded, feeling grateful too. "Thank you for trusting me. This is only the beginning." The story of the crash, the secret package, and the nervous moments had come full circle. What once seemed like a disaster was now a story of courage, honesty, and new chances. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, the narrator knew that life on the farm would never be the same. It had been touched by truth and kindness, and that made all the difference. The barn would stand strong. It's just like the people who cared for it, ready for whatever the future might bring. Would you like me to help you with expanding the entire story into a full narrative, or assist with anything else?